Have you ever tried to reach a location, but got caught up or lost along the way? Perhaps you brought your phone and it died, so using Google Maps or guidance from the internet wasn't an option. Or maybe you didn't even have your phone with you to begin with, yet you struggle with a map and have no idea what direction you could possibly be facing. When you find yourself in this situation, what do you turn to for help, if not a compass? Without a sense of direction and already struggling to get an idea of where you are in space, the odds are already against you. Do you find yourself wishing for a miracle, wondering if there was some kind of tool to aid you, or help you at least find some way home? Well, you are in luck, because there is such a tool, and it is called the Astrolabe. The Astrolabe is a small, compact device, a circular disc with two ruler-like measuring sticks on either side. This device can calculate the position of the sun, the stars, and measure latitude as well as longitude to help you determine where you are. Invented roughly around 220 BC by the Hellenistic civilization of the Mediterranean, the Astrolabe is a tool that has literally been around for thousands of years. It is a tool of ancestry, having been relied on by civilizations for navigation, being one of the world's first astrological computing devices. An astrolabe is made up of a rate, a ruler that points to the position of the stars, a rule and an alidade that both line up in a position to point to the sun, and a mother, which acts as the board that gives calculated measures including dates, as well as a zodiac scale, holding the entire device together. In more detail, the astrolabe can perform a great number of tasks. It can be used to identify stars and planets. It can also determine the local latitude given the local time, as well as the other way around. This device triangulates, surveys, determines a date, and even has the potential to predict climate. When it was used by navigators on the tides of the ancient ocean, this device could successfully help navigate a potentially lost sailor to land. The astrolabe became a tool that was essential to any sailor or traveler looking to avoid getting helplessly lost. This tool became the difference between life or death for the weary traveler and the weary sailor. So what does the astrolabe have to do with the modern traveler? Meet Gary. Gary's a married man in his 50s with 2 kids and a very smart wife. Gary lives at the edge of the city, working a full-time job as a mechanic for a pretty penny. Gary loves traveling. Gary also loves to tinker and build new things to help around the house. Gary is smart, but prefers simplistic approaches to difficult problems. Gary, in his age, isn't a fan of technology, unless it's a television, of course. But when it comes to smartphones and apps, Gary would rather stay far away from them, as he considers to be old-fashioned. On one occasion, while returning home from a road trip with his family, Gary himself got pretty lost along the highway. While his wife insisted that they should use Google Maps as opposed to Gary's regular map, Gary insisted on relying on his old compass and what he considers his intuition. In the end, Gary's wife asked for directions. However, following this turn of events, Gary discovered the astrolabe when reading one of his books. Gary was drawn to the device. While it looked complicated at first, Gary himself was able to make one with ease, using what he already has in his house. Being a fan of exploring, Gary thought best to test this device on a camping trip. Gary called his friend, and together they planned a trip through a favorite forest of theirs. Packing his compass, map, and essentials, Gary also planned to bring along his new astrolabe on this trip. Although the route for the hike was planned, Gary's hike would be in this territory that was unfamiliar to him. Gary and his friend arrived at their campsite and immediately began to trek through the forest. Gary was hoping to get to the site that they had chosen that day earlier. The terrain proved to be diverse and complicated, almost overwhelming both Gary and his friend going along the chosen path. Almost immediately, trouble struck. Gary realized he had no idea where he was, and neither did his friend. When he brought out his bag, he realized there was no compass, as he had actually forgotten to pack it. When Gary's friend started to panic, Gary reassured him, pulling out his astrolabe and using it for the first time. Using the mother, alidade, and rule, Gary quickly located the position of the sun, and successfully determined which direction he was in. Gary was surprised at how easy this was to do, and how confident it made him feel. Gary went from being intimidated by the device to feeling as if he knew exactly what else to do. Gary, now knowing the direction he is facing, plots ahead with his friend, eventually reaching their campsite. However, Gary and his friend can't seem to remember the date, which concerns both of them greatly. Just then, Gary remembers that by using his astrolabe, he can determine the elevation of the stars and thereby confirm the date. When night falls, Gary makes him and his friend dinner. Following this, Gary uses the rate on the astrolabe to check the constellations, following the brightest star in the sky. Gary's friend is astonished at this, as he knows Gary for being relatively helpless when it comes to coordinates of constellations. However, Gary quickly figured out the coordination of the night sky. Gary went to bed, and the next day double-checked with his astrolabe to once again determine his direction and position. Gary had no problem learning to use the basic functions of this device, and noticed how much more hands-on and intuitive it was than his compass. Even someone as simple as Gary could learn to use and thrive off this device. Gary is just an example of one of many people who, despite living in a digital age, will always prefer more hands-on methods to deal with problems such as navigation and wayfinding. Although ancient technology might not initially seem as relevant today, the truth is that a device like the Astrolabe will never use its usability or user-friendly aspect. Made thousands of years ago, the Astrolabe is a testament to human intuition because it draws a line between innovation and simplicity. The Astrolabe is as portable as an iPad, as usable as an iPhone, and as innovative as the modern-day computer. When it comes to navigation, this device remains as ingenious as the day that it was invented.